Hi, everybody. This is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It is Tuesday, September 11th, and today we're going to be talking about the entrance of Venus into Scorpio, but in particular, we're going to be talking about the opposition to Uranus, which is taking place tomorrow, and which will be perfecting actually several times between now and the end of November. So it's definitely a big transit as transits go. But specifically because this is a transit that is also taking place several times due to Venus's retrograde. So I had some issues with the preview feature of Facebook Live this morning, so I wasn't able to adjust my camera prior to getting started. The preview screen was black. I don't know if anyone has ever dealt with that before, but it's kind of a weird glitch. At any rate, so some good stuff to talk about today. Just recently, in the past couple of days, Venus entered Scorpio and is going to turn retrograde next month, right around, I think it's like October 9th. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but basically, it's going to, as it moves to turn retrograde in Scorpio, it will oppose Uranus tomorrow, and then it is going to oppose Uranus in its retrograde again on October 31st, and the final opposition by direct movement after Venus has turned direct again will be on November 30th. And this time, Venus will be in the late degrees of Libra, opposing Uranus in the late degrees of Aries. So it's actually also, it's pretty unique as far as the transit goes, because you'll get 3 of these oppositions. And the final opposition will have both an outer planet and, like Uranus and Venus, changing signs as they make the final opposition, which could indicate a significant shift in the storyline of this astrological configuration. So it's unique. Trying to get a read on it isn't something that you do at once. If there's one thing I've learned in doing a lot of mundane forecasting over the years, it's that a lot of transits, astrologers will, like myself included, will pretend as though we know all about. We know exactly what to anticipate. We know precisely what's going to happen. Here's what to expect. And obviously, we do. Astrologers have some level of expertise, but we also, every transit is new to us as well. And so my approach to doing transits in general, especially transits like this one, which have several phases of the same exact aspect repeating, is to kind of meditate on the aspect from several different angles over the course of a longer period of time. So I might write something about Venus opposite Uranus now, and then I might write something about it again, and then maybe one more time leading up to or just after, within the span of maybe a week or two. That's usually how I would approach something like this. I'll give it some mentions, kind of explore different dimensions of it. And then one of the most valuable things that I've found for tracking transits is also that as you're seeing the planetary dynamics unfold in your life, there's always an opportunity to reflect upon the lessons and insights that you've been gaining from the experiences. It's not just, here's how it showed up. Oh my gosh, isn't that crazy how accurate it is? And that's fun. That's one part of it. But it's also, what have the lessons been? What have I been learning? What have some of the specific insights been? And usually I'll do a layer of forecasting that will work into the archetypal variations or combinations of the planets involved in an aspect, and different layers of the interpretations that are interesting, and try to maybe educate people a little bit about that. What does it mean that Venus is in Scorpio? We're going to talk about today. But then also, I'm also very passionate about just trying to, eventually start digging a little deeper into the transit and saying, here's some insights. Here's some specific spiritual teachings that accompany these dynamics, of many, of course. But so that's how this will go too. But this is kind of, again, this is a unique opportunity because we have essentially this month, October and November, 3 periods of time. During that entire time, it's also worth mentioning that the planet Venus will be within proximity of Uranus the entire time. So it's like if you're using an orb-based view of degrees or aspects, if you're using an orb or degree-based view of aspects, then they are close enough to each other for a good portion of the next couple of months that really what we're talking about today is going to be in effect for a while, especially during the retrograde portion, which takes place, it's about a 40-day period, loosely speaking, and it happens around October. So I think if I remember correctly, it's October 9th, something like that. Please, if someone has the exact dates, please feel free to put them in the box. That'd be awesome. So the oppositions again, tomorrow, October 31st, and then November 30th. The final push is Venus in Libra and Uranus in Aries, whereas now it's Venus in Scorpio and Uranus in Taurus. So again, that's an interesting twist. All right, well, let's get into it. What should we watch for? Well, here are some of the highlights from my written post today that I'll just sort of re-summarize very briefly. For example, Venus represents the harmonization of things that are different from one another. So you are thinking about Venus usually bringing unlike things together into a likeness, or you're thinking of things that may even be really different from each other, but Venus somehow brings them together and makes something beautiful out of them. So harmonization. Uranus, on the other hand, represents a departure from norms or traditions, and often is specifically about breaking apart established agreement or established consensus. And so they're very different, archetypally speaking, from one another, in the sense that whereas Venus might be that PC attitude you have to have in the workplace in order to get along with everybody, and everybody's a little bit different and you're trying to harmonize, Uranus is more like the defiant rebel in the workplace who just doesn't care about the long-standing tradition of making sure that everybody gets along, on lunch break or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So they're very different in the way that they handle relationships. Uranus tends to be a little bit more individualistic, you might say, or geared toward individuating, becoming more of what we feel we authentically are, or trying to see something become more of what we feel it's possible for it to become. It's more future-oriented. It's about leaving the past, and again, any elements that are consensus-oriented, kind of leaving that behind. And it's not that Venus isn't inventive, or that Venus isn't, can't have an element of individuality or something like that. There is a sharp kind of contrast between the two of them. So sometimes what that means is that you're going to see your relationships are there are elements of your relationships that basically are trying to manage the needs of each individual to become more of themselves, more of what makes them authentically individual and unique, while trying to deal with harmonizing within the context of a relationship. And that could be a romantic relationship, a workplace relationship, all different kinds of relationships, right? So that may not be easy. So I have the ragweed comes out and I just get all this nasally stuff going on. I have allergies to just about everything that comes at this time of year. So At any rate, but like my wife is an herbalist, so she's always giving me good stuff. Anyway, it's possible to see disruptions in relationships due to competing individualized needs and the struggle to meet everyone's individual needs at once. And sometimes that will mean that there are shocking disruptions or departures from the norm in a relationship, or that there are times of renaissance, rebirth, sort of reconfiguring an entire agreement or relationship because the relationship is evolving, or because individuals within the relationship are evolving very quickly and rapidly. And there may even be a sense of urgency, impulsiveness, or recklessness in the air with this one. So you do want to be careful, because Uranus can kind of upset the harmony of Venus. Okay, before we go any further, we have to mention that Venus in Scorpio is traditionally considered to be in her detriment, or one of the Greek words that Robert Schmidt, who was a translator of many of the Hellenistic source texts, he actually translated what we now use as the word detriment as closer to the word exile. And that basically means that it's a planet that is in the sign opposite to its home sign. So Taurus is Venus's home sign. Scorpio is the sign opposite to its home sign. And it brings up the sympathies and antipathies between planets. Venus is in Mars's sign. If Mars is in Venus's sign, then Mars is in his exile. If Venus is in one of Mars's signs, then Venus is in her exile. What does exile mean? It means you're not in your home place. You're in fact not just not in your home place, you're not really in a neutral place or a favorable place either. You're in a place that is somewhat antagonistic to your own nature. Okay, so let's just give a very basic example. Let's say that you are someone who likes figure skating, Olympic figure skating, very Venetian, right? But let's say that you are and you like the ballet, and you like this kind of high artistic bodily performances, things like that. But let's say, for example, that you are forced to go and sit at an MMA cage fight, right? Just a simple example. And that place is going to be naturally uncomfortable for you, because you probably, maybe some people, obviously there can be beauty or competition in both. So there's always a little bit of Mars in Venus and Venus in Mars. But there's competition in figure skating. There's competition in, high levels of dance or whatever. But then take someone who likes those and put them in an MMA space, and they'd be like, this is so ugly and competitive and ruthless and brutal, right? But similarly, if you took someone who really preferred cage fighting and made them go to, an opera or a ballet performance or something that was kind of maybe more refined, artistic Venetian kind of performance or bodily display, and they would be like, oh my gosh, this is so boring, or they might not like it for one reason or another. Now, there's elements. You could say that the study of martial arts that MMA fighters display is, in fact, artful on some level. It's beautiful on some level. I have no doubt that aficionados of the sport probably feel that way. But on the other hand, if you were to ask people in the ballet world or the figure skating world or the opera or any other kind of like high art, is there competitiveness? Is there vindictiveness? Is there, backstabbing? Is there all sorts of like intense cage match like scenarios happening beneath the veneer? They'd probably say yes. But a great example is if you ever saw I think it was Darren Aronofsky did a film called Black Swan, and it was sort of about the madness behind the scenes of ballet company and a student in New York City. I can't remember. It was Natalie Portman maybe played the student. Anyway, but you get the idea. When you talk about Venus in Mars's sign or Mars in Venus's sign, you're talking about putting them in an environment that they are inherently uncomfortable with, it becomes much harder for them to express their own inherent nature. It's just harder for Venus to be like Venus or Mars to be like Mars when they're in the signs contrary to their own sign. Speaking of Venus and Mars, I'm pretty sure my daughter just tried to do a gymnastic move and face planted as a synchronistic moment. Anyway, so when Venus is in Scorpio, it is, and my wife's, so those of you are like, oh my God, you're not going to do anything. My wife's with it right now. So, but, so when Venus is in Scorpio, it's like Venus is trying to harmonize and do Venus related things, beauty, love, aesthetics, art, performance, but usually with an aura of harmony and bringing things together, and trying to do so in Mars's sign, which is more about cutting, dividing, confronting, fighting, courage, fear, aggression, hostility, right? So it's a difficult environment for Venus to get things done in. This Venus is trying to bring compromise, bring solution and resolution or mediation of conflicts and harmony in a place where there are desires that are hard to hide, or desires that may have to come to the surface, where there is jealousy, betrayal, where there are unconscious shadows that may need to come out and be seen, where there is some degree of emotional intensity and confrontation, where there are the complexities of, the subtleties and complexities of emotional dynamics and emotional conflicts that we're trying to find some level of agreement on, but it's really tough because there's Uranus, and Uranus is saying individuate, evolve, transform, make something new, do something eccentric, experiment, think outside of the box, usually with a kind of aura of individuality. So it's a challenging place for Venus to be, for the reasons that I've mentioned about Venus being in Mars's sign, but also because then you're throwing in an opposition with Uranus, and that's just tricky to navigate all of that. So Venus represents beauty, Uranus represents defiance and originality. So you could see, for example, some artistic innovation. You could see the desire to change or innovate or completely shift your style, your taste, your sense of how you appear or what you look like, literally wanting to redo your appearance, like shaving your head or, buying a whole new wardrobe or all of that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to wanting to make changes to relationships, changes to your style, changes to, appearance, we should be very careful, because when Venus is in her detriment, or Venus is in her, what we call her exile, it's also possible, especially on the brink of retrogradation, that there will be what we're doing now impulsively in any areas of our life that match the Venus-Uranus description. Like, let's say you're gonna push for some big change in a relationship or an existing contract or agreement of some kind, or you're gonna wear some controversial new outfit or something. Just remember that with Venus retrograde, you may come back to this decision very shortly, as in like next month. You may be reviewing or revisiting big stylistic or appearance, wardrobe changes or whatever. You may come to regret things that you're doing right now. Like, I can't tell you how many times someone will ask me on the brink of Venus retrograde, should I get this plastic surgery? And I'm always like, I would wait until after the retrogradation, especially if Venus is in Aries or Scorpio, because there's maybe a sense of somebody's desire or impulse, the assertiveness, the desire, the drive, the kind of there's some kind of impulse underneath the surface that may not actually feel or look or accord with your deeper interests over time in the way that you think that they will. So I always say, Venus retrogrades may suggest a revision of Venetian values in general, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just like Mercury retrograde may involve some kind of review of your technology. But you always want to be careful when Mercury's debilitated or Venus is debilitated or any planet is debilitated during a retrograde, because it can be about making changes or revisions that are detrimental, that are an attempt to overcompensate for some thing that you're dealing with. So for example, sometimes people, just to make, this is low hanging fruit, so to speak, but a lot of the times when people are thinking about something really severe, like a very intense series of plastic surgeries or something like that, I'm not sitting there trying not to anyway, judge people. But a lot of the times if I dig beneath the surface a little bit, I'll find out that they're considering doing something specifically because of something else that just happened. And so like, I was just, I had a young woman one time who wanted to get breast implants, and she asked me if I thought it was a good idea, and I said, well, I have my own feelings about that, or whatever, but in terms of the astrology, this was when Venus was retrograde in Aries. I said, what is leading you to want to do this? That would be the important question for me to ask to help you think about whether or not you should do it. And she talked to me about how she wasn't feeling confident in herself in relationships after a bad breakup where she was betrayed. Okay, well, I suggested working on that for a while first, like maybe in therapy, or maybe just doing some healing work around self-image and self-love and etc., doing a little healing work around having been betrayed before making the decision one way or the other to, literally cut her body open and change it in some major way. Now, again, it's not for me to judge what people do or don't do with their bodies, but it was because Venus was debilitated that I said, be careful, because there could be something a little bit impulsive or reckless when Venus is in Mars's sign. And so that's the kind of thing to keep in mind right now, especially given the emphasis on defiance, rebellion, originality, futuristic thinking that Uranus wants to provide us, that Uranus is sort of providing us with. So there may be some changes or revolution that needs to happen to Venetian things, relationships, beauty, style, love, taste, values that you have, material values that you have. Maybe a lot of times people will redo something aesthetic in their house, or they will be ready for some kind of wardrobe change. That's so common. Even just a few days ago, my wife was like, I feel like I'm getting ready for a wardrobe change. And I was like, uh-oh. It's like Venus is about to turn retrograde in Scorpio, and I get that look from her, like, don't even talk to me about the astrology, Like that's actually the truth, though, is that Venus retrogrades often entail simple things like that. But you have to be careful when there's an opposition to Uranus. Uranus can be very individualistic. Venus in Scorpio can sometimes be a little vindictive, meaning there's more of a Mars-like element, but it's subtle because Venus is struggling with the Mars-like element. So whereas, Mars in Aries might not be vindictive at all, they might just go right for having a confrontation, like a healthy old confrontation. Venus in Scorpio might be a little bit more conflicted about how to have a confrontation, and hence vindictiveness, jealousy, betrayal, lust, secrecy, lies, deception, all of those things, because it's not so much that Venus in Scorpio is bad as much as it is that Venus isn't like the environment that she's trying to figure out how to behave in. So that's what you have going on there. So you can also have Venus representing pleasing and sort of stable or harmonic experiences, which generally means flow, grace, ease. Uranus, on the other hand, is shock and disruption, things that happen suddenly, things that happen rapidly, things that disturb or upset the balance or the status quo. Remember, one of Venus's two signs is Libra, where she likes the status quo, so to speak, and she likes balance, I should say, not the status quo, but she likes balance. So Uranus will upset, shock, disrupt. And so with that in mind, and Venus being like, how do I do this? I'm kind of in this turmoily place of Scorpio. How do I do that? So sometimes, again, we will overcompensate. A planet in this situation can easily overcompensate. Like, I'm having trouble dealing with the stress of a situation. And so I'm going to make a sudden, big, total, shocking, disruptive upheaval of a change. And I'm going to do it because, screw it, that kind of thing. But then there will be consequences for that kind of stuff, because that's not Venus so much. Venus might be frustrated, and Uranus might just say, why don't you just, like, wink, wink, why don't you just do something for yourself right now, But it can really upset things, and it will cause a period of, having to reflect, revise, revisit. It could entail a much longer process than you're anticipating. So be very careful in the next 24 hours with the kind of screw diplomacy, attitudes that that if you take that attitude in any situation, like, it could come back to haunt you a little bit right now. So remember, think of the most radical, liberating changes that you want to make on any level as a part of a process that needs to happen between now and basically the end of November. So give it some time and let yourself develop strategy. Let yourself become more aware of what's honestly happening below the surface before moving forward with any big changes rapidly, because Venus's need for harmony is not going to go away, even if it's a little afflicted for now. Here's some other things that I wrote today. The desire to make a statement in a relationship overriding the health of the relationship. Ongoing challenges in relationships involving a reluctance to compromise one's individual desires, needs, or appetites. It could also go the opposite way, where if you have been compromising on something for too long, you may be looking for a way of trying to assert your needs right now within the context of a relationship without killing it, but it may just be that something can't be tolerated anymore as well. Sudden or shocking events involving relationships, love, romance, beauty, sexuality, creativity. This is a big transit potentially for things like people. You will often see Venus-Uranus transits or Uranus to natal Venus when people come out of the closet, or when people radically change they become more public about their sexual identity. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that in charts. Or when there are themes or issues related to women's empowerment, feminism, sexual liberation or experimentation, inventive or original music, art, and fashion. In Venus and Scorpio, maybe there's a little bit of a dark or exotic edge to whatever is attractive or attracting us right now. You can think about things coming to the surface in relationships, and that meeting and addressing those things, even if it's kind of treacherous, is actually very liberating, can create a kind of breakthrough in a relationship. You can think about a revision of one's personal values, struggles with self-image, and the desire to radically change or alter one's appearance as a way of overcompensating for the feeling that you're not being yourself. So if you're not being yourself, Jim Carrey once said, basically, depression is a sign that your avatar is tired of the role that it's been given to play. It wants a new role. And I think of Uranus in that statement, because Uranus is often, especially with Venus, because Venus is sort of the method actor in all of us. We all go into the world and find ways of being socially acceptable and pleasing. That's the harmonizer in all of us. So that's kind of Venus in your birth chart. And yet we get to a place sometimes where we get tired of method acting. We're all like, I'm the method actor of social likability. I know how to be liked, and Uranus Venus is like, I need to change my social persona, and I need to, it might be disruptive at first. Sometimes it's not about overcompensating. It's literally just about the hitch in your giddy up that happens when you're trying to become a new version of yourself. it's just awkward, and sometimes you disappoint people, or people misunderstand you, or you feel misunderstood. And that's part of the process. It's part of the birthing process of, adjusting who you are, how you're showing up in the world. Issues surrounding identity politics in the collective, changes, transformations of sexual identity, the collective relationship to sexual identity issues, things like that. You may see public breakups or more controversial things in the news related to any of the topics that we're talking about. So there's a lot of different possible combinations, but that's what you're looking at overall. And then remember that the first opposition is tomorrow, then September 12th, or then October 31st. And then, so it should make for a very interesting Halloween costume. And then, or malfunctions, costume or wardrobe malfunctions. Be on the lookout for those on Halloween this year. And then the final opposition on November 30th. I think it's very interesting that the final opposition will switch and Venus will be in her power, opposite Uranus in Aries, Mars's sign. That final opposition is going to offer some kind of moment for integrating all of this and completing something and finding an actual sweet spot or balance, finding the compromise that allows you to individuate, but is also it's pleasing to others. It harmonizes. Because Venus will be in her own sign, in her own power, she has much more dignity to be really poised and balanced. Opposite Uranus in Aries, the desire for change will become more intense and less Venetian, which is funny, right? Because Uranus is in Taurus right now, which is Venus's sign. So again, the emphasis on how do I create change that doesn't sink the ship, trash the house, crash the boat? You know what I mean? Because Taurus is interested in Venetian stability, whereas Venus in Scorpio is trying to confront something and struggling a little bit. But then again, November 30th, you have Venus in her own sign, and then Uranus backs into Mars's sign. So there's something there, right? There's something about the push and pull, the give and take. I think it's a thing that we all deal with, right? Constantly. In fact, if there's one thing I see in the world today that we're all struggling with, it's kind of an itchy trigger finger. I see this from police officers killing people too easily. I see this in social media, people getting offended too easily about everything, people sounding off and going to extremes in how they talk to one another. And I find myself getting triggered by things way too easily. This is, in a sense, part of the moment that we've been living in with Uranus and Aries for a long time. And things are changing a little bit as Uranus has entered Taurus. But Uranus in Aries is more defiant and has a fast trigger. And you can time out the Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, so many of the very powerful elements of resistance that have been much more fierce to the entrance of Uranus and Taurus. Go back to 2010, 2011. And that was also the beginning of Uranus square Pluto. So now the mood is shifting a little bit as Uranus is entering Taurus. We're starting to work, I think, as I'm just feeling the mood since Uranus has entered Taurus, we're starting to work toward the possibility of changes being made in ways that also harmonize. How do we do that? Because at the end of the day, even though there's so much polarization and you see it, a lot of that is also the kind of mentality that arises in the collective. But ultimately, we're not just collective, right? We're also personal, individual beings who aren't just people in groups or defined by groups. So I think probably something that's hopeful, even though it may not be right in our view all the time, is that underneath the surface, a lot of people, most people are equipped with a Venetian function. We're not just all about conflicts and being triggered by things that make us angry. We are also people who legitimately want harmony and peace because it feels good. I mean, it might even be just that selfish that it actually just feels good to not have things be crazy all the time. But the simple point is that this Venus-Mars Venus-Mars dynamic that's present in the signs involved between Venus and Uranus over the next couple of months is an indication that we're looking for a different way of creating harmony. How do I make radical changes, but do so with some eye for trying to keep the peace along the way? So that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope that this was interesting, and I'm going to look at questions and then we'll be done. Oh, by the way, a few announcements. I will be doing planets in profile video on Venus in Scorpio today. So that's a continuation of the planets in profile series that I started this summer. So there'll be another video on my YouTube page today exploring the general meaning of Venus in Scorpio, which we've already sort of covered here, but be a separate video on that. And then you should also know that in the next week, I'll be opening registration for my fall courses. So there's an advanced workshop for people who have been through my year 1 program or who are completing it. That's also open to people who have had some training or study in Hellenistic astrology before. There will also be a year 1 course for people who are new to ancient astrology. It's called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, and it's sort of a blend of ancient astrology that's sort of designed to be taught for students who also maybe like other modern forms of astrology and are familiar with those. So that course starts on Saturday afternoons in the first Saturday of December, and registration for that will be open in like the next week, probably as soon as I get around to making the email newsletter announcing it. And then so those 2 courses will be opening in the very beginning of December. And then in the meantime, I am gearing up. Next month, I'll be doing a videographer friend coming down. Will be doing the video for me for my annual Kickstarter. So I will be raising money to support all of the talks that I do and written content that I create year round. This will be my 5th year doing it, and that'll be coming up toward the end of November. So that's what, those are a few announcements there. All right, so questions. And you can find more information about all of that at www.nightlightastrology.com. All right, let's see, what do we got here? Good morning, lots of good mornings. Good morning. Venus retrograde, October, 6th of October. 10 degrees Scorpio. Thank you. That's great. I thought it was the 9th, but the 6th. That's right. I was thinking of 9 or 10 degrees, and then I just was getting it mixed up with the date. Venus stations retrograde on October 5th. Okay, so it's October 5th. Salim is telling us. And stations direct on November 16th. Hey, buddy, by the way. And then Venus will be direct on... November 16th at 25 degrees Libra, right? And then it'll go to by November, 30th to the opposition again. Rise of women's tennis player, Haitian Japanese, Osaka. Okay. You got some allergies too. Okay. Jennifer, this transit just strikes the heart of ugh for me. I wish I welcomed it and saw myself as receiving its benefits versus feeling fear. Well, I think the Venus retrograde, if you go back to 2010, the fall of 2010, that was the last time Venus was retrograde in Scorpio. It strikes a little fear into me because I was going through a really nasty breakup at that time. My wife and I are good, but it's still like, oh gosh, that was a very conflicted time. A lot of people had challenging moments when Venus is retrograde in Scorpio last. So you look back to that time, see what was going on, see what house Scorpio is in your chart or occupies as a whole sign house. Maybe you get some hint as to what kinds of changes are coming, and look across the wheel at Taurus and see where Uranus is right now. You think about Uranus bringing new changes and demanding changes and innovation in the area that it's just entered since May of your birth chart, which is early Taurus or the whole sign house of Taurus. And then think of Venus trying to figure out, negotiate, compromise, and change in the opposite area of life at the same time while within Mars's sign. Gives you a pretty good idea of what to expect. Ever seen The Cross and the Switchblade? No, I haven't. It sounds like a Lifetime original. I'm just kidding, Lisa. I don't know anything about it. Maybe it's like some amazingly great movie. I sound like a fool. Okay, let's see. I have multiple times cut off, once even shaved off my hair. Oh wow, that's intense. Yeah. I'm always impressed with when women with really long hair do it, especially after having long hair as a guy, because it took up a lot of courage to like shave the whole thing off. So, Scorpio is my second house. I've been frustrated with my financial situation between me and my husband. Okay, because it's going to be opposite the eighth. Yeah. I was thinking I can just quit my job. That will change the dynamic, and I can't overgive money, and I have so much imbalance if I have no money to give. Right, right. That would be one of those maybe impulsive decisions, which I see you laughing about. So yeah. At 12, maybe it's the right thing to do. I don't know. At 12, a girl shaving part of her head and being accidentally called a boy for about 6 months. Ironically, did it to fit in. Good times. Also had a severe cold sore on my face that took a month to heal. Oh, that's hard. I'm sorry to hear that. Venus in Scorpio, 12th house. Yeah, so it might be a little bit more subtle and, getting some in those unconscious material in the 12th house that you're looking at there. I have natal Venus Scorpio up opposite natal Uranus. Okay, so you've been doing this one your whole life. Some question when you have transits watching your natal, is this a double whammy? Um, I don't know. I guess you could say that when the aspect comes around, it may be somewhat familiar to you. So maybe it's a little easier. I don't know. I know I can say based on my own chart and repeating aspects from within my own birth chart, I'm like, they feel like they're in my wheelhouse a little bit. But just based on today's aspects, what would one expect if they are starting a business, online business? I would just say expect the unexpected. You just had a new moon. It's a really strong Mercury right now in Virgo, so not the worst time in the world, but expect maybe certain elements of the design style. If there's anything Venetian related to the products that you're selling, there may be some revisions. That's not so abnormal for the beginning of a business. Let's check out Swedish Metal Aid for an interesting Venus in Scorpio exploration. Oh, interesting. Clarify again which class is for beginners. I plan to jump in and I'm looking for the right place. Beautiful. So the right class would be Ancient Astrology for Modern Times or Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. That's the title of the course, which begins on Saturday afternoons in early December. And registration will be opening shortly. And you can look under the certification courses on my website at nightlightastrology.com. I'll even put it in right now so you can see it. Or I'll after we're done here, I'll put it in so you've got it. Okay, so I was tempted to shave off my waist long hair last night. Oh wow, yeah, that would have been an amazing transformation. Waist long is no joke either. I mean, I just can't even imagine how long that would have taken. All right, well, that's what we've got for today. I hope you all have a beautiful day. And good luck navigating the Venus-Uranus dynamic. Stories, please. Please post your stories on this, on my wall or on my YouTube page or something like that. I'd love to hear them. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.